laughing. I want to ask you, why do so many people get on Hammer? I mean, the man sold 10 million records.
I'm not getting on Hammer, and I'm not gonna say he did sell 10 million records, but crack fiends bought 10 million rocks. That don't mean crack is good.
That goddamn MC Hammer, very serious about beef. Y'all laugh and y'all joke about Hammer. No.
Back then, Tupac thought MC Hammer was a joke. Shiny pants, dancing, bubblegum rap.
Can't Touch This by MC Hammer.
Okay, and why do you like that one?
Because it's raging and he's funky. Funky dance steps.
But what Pac didn't know is that Hammer wasn't just some flashy entertainer. Behind the glitz was a man tied to real street power and goons in Raiders jackets. Hammer had killers on payroll.
Very serious about beef. Oh, you gonna talk about my dancing pants? I see you. And he will whoop it out.
And when Pac ran his mouth backstage at a Bay Area show in 1991, he found out. Then it wasn't funny anymore. Some say it's a miracle the two squashed their beef, because if they hadn't, it might have turned into a huge war, since Pac had his own demons.
He's starting to feel himself.
Yeah, like he became Bishop.
He really think he's Bishop, but I'm like, he was wilder than Bishop before that. He actually, by the time y'all knew who he was, he had calmed down.
Let's talk about it. The Blatant Mockery. A young Tupac, vibrant and rash, was lounging back in a TV studio chair, grinning ear to ear. His voice, cocky and amused, sliced through the haze. He was asked what he thought about MC Hammer's song You Can't Touch This since it sold 10 million records. Pac laughed. That don't mean nothing, he said. Crackheads bought 10 million rocks, don't mean crack is good.
I mean, I'm down with him because he's a brother and he's making his mail. But, however, he's diluting rap. You know what I'm saying? He's playing that Sambo role, and the reason everybody's buying his record is because he's no threat, and everybody want to see Sambo dance.
The studio erupted, but it was 1991, and Hammer was the megastar, a walking, breathing meme before memes existed. And Pac, just 20, still clawing his way up, had no time for gimmicks. But then the tone would instantly shift. Fat Joe, with low voice and wide eyes, recalled a chance encounter in a Vegas airport. He told me straight up, "Yo, Joe, they don't get it. I'm Hammer, but I get it poppin' for real."
I bumped into him in the airport in Vegas, and I seen him, and he was like, "Yo, Joe, what's up, man?" He said, "Yo, sit down, let's talk. I'm waiting for the plane." And he was like, "Yo, I'm not, Hammer, I get it popping for real."
Now you're hearing from E40, from Suge Knight, from Bay Area OGs whose names don't show up in credits, but those words carry weight in the streets. People thought Hammer was soft, E40 said, but the Bay knew, Oakland knew. The man wasn't to be played with. Hammer wasn't just some glittery showman with a prayer circle in a mansion. He wasn't just the guy with a doll deal and Taco Bell commercials. He was from East Oakland. Born Stanley Kirk Burrell, MC Hammer was raised in the crucible of the Bay, where flashy talk gets you checked real quick, and his street roots ran deeper than people wanted to admit. His brother, Louis Burrell, aka Gangsta Lou, was known in the streets.
His brother gangster. Louis Barrett, you feel me? He a gangster. You know what I'm saying? He's an intelligent gangster, you feel me?
The same Hammer who was funding youth centers and Sunday school choirs was also cutting checks for his crew to be armed security, not just at concerts but in everyday life. In the early 90s, there were whispers that he was strapped at all times. He didn't need an entourage to defend his name. He just liked having witnesses. And the Bay knew this. That's why even the hardest rappers tread lightly when it came to throwing dirt on Hammer's name. But Tupac didn't know that. Not yet. Tupac's rawness before fame. Back in 1991, you could still catch Tupac walking down MacArthur Boulevard in Oakland with a notebook stuffed in his coat, a fierce gleam in his eyes and nothing to lose. He was 20 years old, fresh-faced but hard, still carrying the weight of the streets from Marin City, still sharpening that voice that would later shake the world.
Hardcore gangster, and that's what Suge was about. You feel me? So that's how that Oakland connection happened. And then it was more solid.
But make no mistake, Tupac Shakur didn't wait for fame to start speaking his truth. He came out the gate raw, loud, and unfiltered. At the time, he was rolling with Digital Underground. Technically a backup dancer, a hype man, but he already burned with a kind of fire that wouldn't be contained. When they were shooting Same Song, Tupac barely had a verse on it, just a few bars. But even then, he stood out. He had the bone nose ring, the Afrocentric gear, the energy of a revolutionary in a rap cipher. That brief appearance lit the spark. Digital Underground knew it too. Money B and Chopmaster Jay later recalled that when Tupac showed up, still part of his original crew, Strictly Dope, he didn't even need him to say a word. He consumed the room. There could be 10 MCs battling, 10 stories flying around the table, but when Pac opened his mouth, everything stopped.
When I first heard him, I thought that Ray and Pac were equally talented MCs. I thought they were cool. But it was just Pac's personality was, you know, if you in the room.
From the first day you met him,
you first day, he consumed the room.
But for all his charisma, Tupac wasn't trying to blend in. He was studying, watching, and more than anything, he hated what he thought was fake. That's where MC Hammer came in. Hammer was the king of the radio in '91. Baggy pants, flashy videos, Pepsi commercials, cartoon specials. You Can't Touch This was inescapable.
That Bay, Oakland connection, and Pac came in doing his. You couldn't deny him.
Yeah, I remember that Pumps in the...
And in the Bay, Hammer wasn't just a rapper, he was a force. But to a young Tupac, trying to break out of the background, trying to say something real, Hammer's whole image felt like betrayal. All the dance routines, the shiny suits, it was everything Pac thought hip-hop wasn't.
The reason, I'm down with him because he's a brother and he's making his mail. But, however, he's diluting rap. You know what I'm saying? He's playing that Sambo role, and the reason everybody's buying his record is because he's no threat, and everybody want to see Sambo dead.
To Pac, rap was supposed to be revolutionary, hard, grounded in struggle. And here was this guy from Oakland, Pac's own turf, turning hip-hop into Vegas showbiz. It didn't sit right with him. The tension didn't start with a formal diss track, though. It started the way things often did in the Bay back then. Quiet, indirect, dangerous. A freestyle here, a side-eye on stage, a mocking line at a party cipher. Word travels fast in Oakland, and when Pac dropped a line dismissing Hammer's act as plastic hip-hop, the streets caught wind. The message wasn't subtle. That's when things started to shift, because while Pac saw Hammer as soft, commercial sellout, Oakland didn't necessarily agree, at least not on the streets. Hammer had muscle. He gave back to the community, he put people on, he employed half of East Oakland, some said, and that kind of loyalty doesn't disappear because a hungry kid with a pen thinks you're corny.
MC Hammer just his money off. When you knew that I was employing 200 people from my community, it said more about you than it did about me. We were dying. This is the real thing. It's not fake. Go and look at the murder rate in my city at the time. Some of the people that were dying were my classmates, my neighbors.
But Pac didn't back down. He never backed down. This was the same guy who, even in those early days, had nothing. Barely any money, crashing at friends' apartments, but would fight tooth and nail just to make sure you respected him. Respect was oxygen. Without it, he couldn't breathe.
He didn't have much, so respect was everything.
Right.
So he wasn't taking any, he wasn't having it.
Right.
And he would do whatever to make sure that you respected him from the jump. You know?
Even when he was just Tupac, the backup dancer, before Tupacalypse Now had even dropped, he was already moving like a prophet in the wilderness. Angry, unpolished, visionary. His debut album wasn't club ready, it wasn't made to dance to, it was made to burn. Brenda's Got a Baby, Trapped, If My Homie Calls, he was speaking truth to power, even when that power looked like his own people, especially when it did. But even then, Pac wasn't reckless, not really. He was strategic. He read constantly, he planned, he studied chess and war and Malcolm X.
He would read, he wrote poetry, he was well-read.
You want to be like Pac, read a book.
He studied, he strategized and planned things out all the time.
So when he poked at Hammer, you better believe he knew what kind of hornet's nest he was stirring. What he might not have known yet was that MC Hammer wasn't just a dancer with a big label deal. He was tied into people who didn't laugh off disrespect, people who moved in the shadows of the Bay and real pull. People who wouldn't hesitate to remind you that just because someone's wearing parachute pants doesn't mean they're not packing heat. MC Hammer's danger side. And that's because Hammer didn't dress like a gangster. He didn't rap like one either. But Hammer didn't grow up on studio sets. He came up in the deep corners of East Oakland, where street codes were carved in loss and loyalty, and breaking them got you dealt with. This was the real Oakland, a city that chewed boys up and spit out men or bodies.
High Street is where I grew up my whole life from. The bank boys. The Burrells, Ghost Town. Y'all know what it is, all of it. So we not here, finessing nothing. We're talking about Oakland.
Hammer survived it with a name that rang out in more than just church halls, because behind the gospel tracks and million-dollar deals, there was a man who could make a phone call and have your tour bus stop before it reached the next block. The streets knew it, the Crips respected it, and the OGs treated him like family, not just a rapper with a clean image, because long before platinum plaques, Hammer had already earned stripes in silence. He had neighborhood shooters on payroll, not just as security, but as loyalty insurance.
It went down in the streets. It wasn't really no phone calls, no emails saying I'm sorry. It was just right there. Okay, you said something, we meeting you at your show. You know the routine.
Even rappers who prided themselves on street credentials stepped light around Hammer. Redman found that out the hard way. He'd clowned Hammer on a skit, poked fun at his clean image, said the rants were all show and no soul. 3 years later, Redman ran into Hammer, and it wasn't a warm reunion. The smile was gone. Redman, years later, looked dead serious in the interview, voice dropping low as he said, "Y'all joke about Hammer? Nah. That guy was deep."
Goddamn MC Hammer, very serious about beef. Y'all motherfuckers laugh and y'all joke about Hammer? No. That was deep with niggas. And he used to what anybody who talks come to the Bay Area, they was in for it.
It wasn't just street artists either. Hammer once chased another rapper down for talking slick in an interview. Didn't send anyone, didn't subtweet. He got in the car and went. Because you don't build an empire in a cutthroat industry without making examples. You don't get your own label, your own deals, your own space, unless people fear what happens when they cross you. And Hammer made people fear politely.
Now the beef is settled. No, once someone said something about you, it was hard to hear another response like, did he say sorry? And if he did say sorry, it ain't come through the grapevine to another week or so. By then, you already done seen it at another show already. So, yeah, it was really aggressive, man.
Pac, for all his fire and fury, was still adjusting, still stepping into the deeper waters of the West Coast. He was bold, loud, raw, but that night, when the glimmer peeled off and the reality hit, he saw something different in Hammer. He was the kind of man who didn't fight to be respected because he already was. Billboard success aside, Hammer's name didn't just echo in music studios. It echoed through corners, cliques, and courtrooms. He didn't rap about pulling triggers, but everyone in Oakland knew that if you disrespected Hammer, someone else might pull theirs.
Somebody was making Hammer uncomfortable. Without him saying I'm uncomfortable, somebody around him would have came to you and said, quit making Hammer uncomfortable. Right. It would have been like a no negotiable statement.
How the beef got squashed. So now Pac's performing in the Bay, and somewhere in that room, in the low buzz and dim corners, were men who'd go to war for Hammer without flinching. Backstage, there was movement, quiet conversations, a slight shift in Pac's posture. His people were alert, eyes scanning exits and entries, ears tuned to the change in atmosphere. He wasn't scared, but he was calculating. That's what made him dangerous in a different way. He knew how to read a room, how to pull back just enough before a moment went sideways. Then Hammer showed up. He walked in like he knew exactly how things could go and was ready for all of it. A preacher's calm but with a soldier's presence. No antics, no puffed up chest, just that cold, unshakable look in his eyes that said, "I'm not here to dance." Pac turned and saw him, and in that instant, the air shifted again. Something unspoken passed between them. Not fear, not even respect yet, but understanding. And Pac, who just minutes before had been feeding off the crowd's energy, was now standing face to face with a man he'd underestimated. It wasn't the MC Hammer people clowned on BET. This was Stanley Kirk Burrell from the east side of Oakland, the kid who grew up with hustlers, the man who had real pull in the streets and a Rolodex of names you didn't say out loud unless you had a death wish. And that night, all of that, the music, the fame, the past interviews, fell away. It was just two men, one rising, one established, both knowing it could go left in a heartbeat. But it didn't, because Pac made the grown choice. They exchanged a few words, low, private, lost to the noise around them. No one knows exactly what was said, and that's probably for the best. But from that moment on, Pac never said another word about Hammer. Sometimes the most dangerous men don't need to yell, they just need to show up. And that night, Hammer showed up. Pac's own demon side. But now let's look the other way, because the man Hammer nearly clashed with wasn't some industry puppet as well. He was chaos dressed in black leather, poetry dripped in gunpowder. You want to talk about danger? Let's talk about Tupac's demon side.
Because he was just a wild, out in Marin City, out the jungles, out,
Right.
you know, they little projects or whatever, and he ain't had shit, so he was, was going for it.
In 1993, back when Tupac was filming Above the Rim, he was bouncing between sets and street corners, pulling off the double life only a few in the game could manage. On set, he was all in, memorized lines, professional attitude, but once the camera stopped rolling, that's when things got unpredictable. On one night, something snapped loose in the universe, and the world saw the kind of man Pac really was when the gloves came off. He was rolling deep in a black BMW 750, the paint still gleaming from the dealership. The outlaws were in tow. That's how they moved, tight, efficient, alert. Just outside a hotel, they caught sight of two white men stomping a black kid. At first, it was just another sidewalk scuffle, nothing serious, but as they crept closer, the fog cleared.
Authorities say two officers, brothers, were crossing the street when a car allegedly nearly hit them. An argument followed, and shots were fired.
These weren't just any white men. They were off-duty cops, drunk, armed, and working that poor kid like he owed them a lifetime. Pac didn't wait for the story. He didn't need one. He kicked open the car door, boots stomping pavement, coat flying like a war banner in the night. That was Pac, never the type to let injustice slide, even if it cost him everything. And as soon as he moved, the whole pack moved with him. They circled, and then one of the white men made a choice he'd regret forever. He pulled a gun and pointed it straight at Tupac's chest. But then the man turned, raised his pistol, and smashed in the window of Pac's brand new BMW. Glass exploded. The moment was live, and Pac answered the only way he knew how. He dropped to one knee like a soldier taking position in a foxhole and fired two shots.
The white dudes pulled out guns on him. They were off-duty cops themselves. And they shot at him, missed. He pulled out a gun and shot.
Two white cops fell to the ground. Sirens screamed through Atlanta. A black man had just shot two white police officers in the South. It should have been the end, a life sentence, a public execution, but it wasn't. Because Pac didn't just survive it, he won.
Rapper Tupac Shakur appeared in municipal court this morning after his attorney entered a plea of not guilty to 2 counts of aggravated assault in connection to the shooting of 2 off-duty police officers.
It turned out those cops weren't just drunk. They'd stolen the guns from the evidence locker. They weren't breaking up a fight, but instigating it. Pac saw wrong and did what no one else would. He stood tall.
You know, the man has been killed, and not here to judge him, but he also was not convicted or charged. Is it
No,
true?
ma'am.
How do you respond, Scott, to the fact that when we said he wasn't charged, the audience actually applauded in this room?
Well,
how do you feel about that?
I don't, everyone's got their own opinion. I can't judge their opinion.
That wasn't the only time his demon side took the wheel. There's also the East Coast-West Coast War. It started with whispers in basements and turned into full-blown media-fueled hellfire. Pac versus Biggie. Death Row versus Bad Boy. It was more than rap beef. It was territorial, cultural, biblical, and Pac was right in the middle, throwing flames like a dragon with no leash. But he didn't just target rappers. He went for gangs, too. Chicago, Black Disciples, one of the deepest, most dangerous sets in the nation. Pac stood in the heart of their turf and pointed a lyrical gun right at their chest. This was after a tragic shooting. A little boy caught a stray and lost his life. The city cried, mothers wept, the streets stayed silent, scared to name names. But Pac got on stage and accused the Black Disciples of the killing. He didn't just name drop, he called them out with a kind of raw fury that only a man with nothing to lose could muster. And still, he walked out alive. What kind of man moves like that, who takes on police, record labels, and some of the most dangerous gangs in America and walks away with a crooked smile and another verse in his notebook? Tupac Shakur. The artist, the soldier, the madman, the martyr. If the fuse between Pac and Hammer had ignited, it wouldn't have been just a clash of personalities. It would have been Oakland versus the Outlaws, Bay Blood versus Death Row Artillery. It would have scorched everything in between, and the world might have never recovered. But somehow, by luck, fate, or divine mercy, that war never came. The storm circled, thunder rumbled, but it passed without striking. From enemies to brothers. And later, Hammer, the man Pac once clowned on stage, would step in between him and what looked like another one of those death row situations, the kind where things go left quick. The same Hammer Pac had laughed at during shows, the one he saw as a shiny suit from another era, would stare down the energy in the room like he owned it. Hammer had been famous in a way Pac hadn't yet tasted. Massive tours, cartoon shows, awards piled high like trophies from another lifetime. But now, both of them were orbiting death row records like two satellites too close to the sun. The edge was always there, and they knew it. Hammer was one of the few who didn't need anything from Pac. That's what made it real. Pac had millions of voices in his ear. Managers, yes men, vultures dressed in black. But Hammer was just there, present, listening, advising. Not as an elder, not as a preacher, as a brother. It shocked the room when Pac started bringing Hammer around more often. To the studio, to the shoots, behind closed doors. They worked on tracks, they swapped verses, and Pac, in his last months, was trying to build something bigger than albums and beef, a legacy. Hammer was part of that vision. Pac didn't just put him on a song, he built one for him, laid the groundwork, told him, "You tight, I got you." And when Hammer walked into the booth and heard the beat thump under the words, "You wonder why they call me Hammer," he knew Pac wasn't doing it for clout. He was doing it because he meant it, because he respected what Hammer represented. Oakland, loyalty, realness.
Studio, and Pac had already recorded a new Hammer song. And I was like, "What's this, Pac?" And he said, "Man, I gotta, I told you I'm gonna make sure you tight." So,
in an industry obsessed with enemies, the two eventually became brothers.